As explained, the executive order is not only unconstitutional, it is not only a terrible policy, it also conflicts with fundamental American values. We are a nation that rejects the test of ancestry and lineage, and we prefer instead to grant citizenship based on birthplace. That's a choice we've made well over a century ago. To be born in America is to be born an equal citizen. America is excellent at integrating the children of immigrants into our society. It is one of our great strengths. Some provisions of the U.S. Constitution are broad and confusing, but the Citizenship Clause is not one of them. The text, the drafting history, the original understanding, and over a century of unanimous judicial precedent and historical practice all confirm that the Citizenship Clause means what it says. As the text states, the Citizenship Clause grants citizenship to all born in the United States, and the only meaningful exception today is for the children of consular officials. The Citizenship Clause was intended to remove the stain of Dred Scott from our Constitution, the Supreme Court decision that held citizenship turned solely on race and ancestry and not birthplace. In 1868, the nation rejected Dred Scott. And when discussing this addition to the Constitution, the Reconstruction Congress explicitly stated that it wanted to provide citizenship to the 4 million formerly enslaved Americans and the children of immigrants arriving from around the globe. This Congress also acknowledged and well knew that some of those enslaved Americans had been brought into this country in violation of the law, because laws after 1808 prohibited the international slave trade. These were the illegal aliens of the day, and thus it is wrong, as Mr. O'Brien just stated, to say that there wasn't such a thing as an undocumented or illegal alien at the time. The Reconstruction Congress well knew there was, and of course intended to grant those people citizenship. That is why President Trump's executive order has been rejected by every federal court that has addressed it over the last month, 5 and counting, and these judges have been scathing. Federal Judge John Kuhnauer, appointed to the bench by Ronald Reagan, described the executive order as blatantly unconstitutional. Federal Judge Joseph LaPlante, a George W. Bush appointee, enjoined the executive order on the ground that, quote, it contradicts the text of the 14th Amendment and the century-old, untouched precedent that interprets it. These judges have concluded that the Trump administration's arguments in favor of the executive order are ahistorical, atextual, and illogical, also inconsistent with the order itself. For that reason, I'm not going to spend any more of my time here discussing the meaning of the Citizenship Clause, which is detailed in my text of my written statement, and I'm happy to answer questions. But instead, I'm going to move on and talk about the devastating consequences of this executive order for the 3.5 million American families who every year welcome a new child into their family. The executive order claims the power unilaterally to rewrite the Constitution. That alone is disturbing enough. In doing so, it excludes hundreds of thousands of newborn children from citizenship, including the children of immigrants who came legally to the United States. All of these newborn children would be declared undocumented immigrants from the moment they are born. Some would be born stateless, and all would be at risk of being deported away from their parents and denied all the rights and privileges of citizenship at the most vulnerable moment of their new lives. Worse, if this were to go into effect, it would not be limited to the people carved out by the executive order, that is, the children of undocumented immigrants and the children of temporary immigrants. It would affect all Americans, every single person giving birth to a child going forward. All would now have to produce paperwork proving their status, their citizenship, their green card status at the time of the child's birth. And as an immigration lawyer, I will tell you, for many people, that is not easy. I thought this was a committee that favored limited government. This is expanding the federal bureaucracy and the paperwork burdens on these families, hospitals, state agencies, and overburdened immigration officials, as I said, at the most sensitive moments of these people's lives. As explained, the executive order is not only unconstitutional, it is not only a terrible policy, it also conflicts with fundamental American values. We are a nation that rejects the test of ancestry and lineage, and we prefer instead to grant citizenship based on birthplace. That's a choice we've made well over a century ago. To be born in America is to be born an equal citizen. America is excellent at integrating the children of immigrants into our society. It is one of our great strengths. All Americans should be proud that in 1868, the nation rejected Dred Scott and reclaimed citizenship based on location of birth, not lineage and ancestry, welcoming the children of immigrants. We must never go back.
Let me be very clear. Donald Trump's executive order to eliminate birthright citizenship is, quote, blatantly unconstitutional. Those are not my words. Those are the words of Judge John Kuhnauer, a Reagan-appointed federal judge from my home state of Washington. The judge went on to say that while, quote, the rule of law is, according to Trump, something to navigate around or something to be ignored, whether that be for political or personal gain in the courtroom, the rule of law is a bright beacon which that judge intends to follow. For over 100 years, birthright citizenship has been enshrined as a fundamental right under the 14th Amendment. The language in the amendment is very clear. All persons born or naturalized in the United States. In fact, so clear that at least 4 federal judges have concluded that the executive order is unconstitutional. Like many of the attacks on immigrants by the Trump administration, this attack centers on old tropes that question the, quote, allegiance of immigrants. Tropes that were applied to enslaved Black people brought to this country in shackles, as well as Japanese Americans imprisoned and interned during World War II. These attacks are couched in a completely baseless argument that somehow immigrants born in the United States to a parent who is undocumented don't have sole, quote, allegiance to the United States.
So that argument's been made, and it's lost 127 years ago, and it will fail again today, as it already has in front of 5 federal courts.
And at that time, the Supreme Court held that the phrase subject to the jurisdiction thereof was an extremely narrow qualification that only accepted 3 specific classes of persons from citizenship. So can you tell us what those 3 classes were and why they do not apply and implicate children of undocumented immigrants?
Yes, so the Reconstruction Congress was very clear. The Supreme Court agreed in Wong Kim Ark and subsequent cases that the subject to the jurisdiction thereof language applied to 3 groups. One was the children of diplomats and consular officers, for the obvious reason that the French ambassador to the United States doesn't want their child born in the US to be a citizen, and their situation in the United States is they're representing a foreign power. In fact, the embassy itself is considered foreign territory. Native Americans, that was the only really substantive discussion the Reconstruction Congress had. At the time, they suggested this addition of the Citizenship Clause to the 14th Amendment. And they pointed out in many discussions that the Indians, Native American tribes, were sovereign powers with whom we had treaty relations, who were not subject to US law. They had their own tribal courts and laws. And at that time, they wanted to be excluded, and the Reconstruction Congress didn't want them to be automatically included. I should note that there is now a federal law that gives Native Americans automatic birthright citizenship. The final group, I'm happy to say, we've never encountered, which is enemy aliens in occupied territory.
Great. I'm gonna stop you just because I have another question here. One of the lawsuits blocking the order was brought by an individual in my state, Alicia Lopez. She was born and raised in El Salvador, but she fled the country after experiencing a violent and abusive situation. She had applied for asylum, has received a work permit while her application is pending. She's lived in Washington state since 2016. She has a 5-year-old son with her partner. She's pregnant with a second child who is due in July. I want to bring this back to the real impact of what would actually happen. Birthright citizenship has generated this deep sense of membership in our society, a collective commitment to a shared value and opportunity, equality, and contribution that's allowed America to thrive. What's the impact on real-life Americans across this country?
Yeah, to eliminate birthright citizenship would be to create a permanent underclass, a caste system, which was the very result the Reconstruction Congress intended to end.
Thank you so much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.